안녕하세요. 서울 강남치과 배정인 원장입니다.
Hello, I am Bae Jung-eun of the Seoul Gangnam Dental Clinic. Last time we looked at the anterior implant prosthesis, and today I'm going to talk about abutment selection. So these are the items I'm going to cover today, up to summary 7 items. So let's review the last lecture. Anterior implant aesthetic consideration needs to be made. So with the screw type provisional crown that can imitate root and transitional zone of the natural tooth, you design for gingival molding and support. And with that, the proper emerger file and the running room can be acquired. And the screw type temporary can also be used as a tool to communicate between the clinic and the lab. And with the proper remodeling, if the gingiva is formed, then the shape of the provisional that the patient was satisfied with, plus if gingiva, even the internal running room, in the way that can be eliminated, you take impression, and with that you make final abutment. Emergency prior with the provisional crown and running room are imitated or referenced to be used for the abutment selection or to design abutment. And the material of the abutment needs to be aesthetic one, so it should be acceptable, should have acceptable abutment shadow and should be able to compensate for future any potential margin of recession. So if you look at the overall process of the anterior implant, I also talked about aesthetic consideration to be made. And the timing of the implant installation, I said immediate or early is more favorable. And gingiva molding, customizable abutment or related to, using that would be more favorable. Wider teeth, central incisor, and for canine, customized abutment or these tools should be used for smaller teeth like the lateral incisor or the anterior lower part. Ready-made abutment sometimes is sufficient, and sufficient gingiva molding tools or screwed abutment is used, then it helps buccal volume increase. Now in gingiva molding starting point,
gingiva molding tool, 스크류 어버트먼트들을 사용을 하면은 버칼 볼륨 증대에도 도움이 되었었고요.
if it's possible, immediate would be the best option, and the molding period should be as long as possible so that it can minimize any changes in the shape. And taking impression, customized impression coping in terms of imitating running room, it's the best option. But using CAD/CAM, then without using this type of coping, the temporary running room can be taken as a reference. So copied temporary running room is transferred as designed for the final abutment and made aesthetic. And the final impression, it's better to do it at bottom level, and if possible, you can minimize gingival steps by doing with scanning. At that time, ultimate level scan, and what you scanned outside the oral, you do 2 times. In other words, a double scanning method is better. So if possible, immediate loading and immediate temporary needs to be created and molded, and running room is imitated so that aesthetic materials, customizable final abutment can be used. That is the most aesthetic pathway. So what I'm going to talk to you in this lecture is customizable and aesthetic final abutment. First, abutment materials and parts need to be selected, and then you will design the abutment. Now, customizable and aesthetic, I said, are two keywords, and when you say customizable in abutment, it means emerger profile area, running room area, and finish line. and finish line. You have inner and outer finish lines, and also top cap. When I say top cap, I don't know whether it's official terminology, but it means that the upper part and the three things are customized: emergence by finish line and top cap. For the screws type, you customize crown on top of emergence profile, and also in abutment aesthetic first, the running room area, the emergence profile area color also needs to be aesthetics. So titanium color or metal color being exposed in the, if it's stick biotype, the metal color is not a problem, but if it's a problem, sometimes you give gold color with a titanium coating or through anodizing. Then you can have gold color, and sometimes you do it with a white color, zirconia abutment or porcelain, in other words, can be used.
그다음에 이제 화이트 컬러를 넣기도 합니다. 뭐 지르코니아 어버트먼트를 사용하거나 아니면은 그쪽에 그 포셀린을 올릴 수도 있겠죠.
So customizable abutment is what I'm going to talk to you. Now, customizable abutment, there are about 6 types. First, temporary abutment. It's not for final, but it's customizable temporary abutment. So let me explain. So temporary abutment, it's used for creating screw type provisional, and we do create model or create shell crown into orally, and shell crown and this abutment, you drip the resin and connect them, and then appropriately abutment post side is cut, and you create screw type abutment. So mostly when we didn't use CAD/CAM and did analog way, we used this approach, and mostly the diameter is on the base side above 4.0, 4.0, and gingiva height is 1, 2, 3, so it varies. Now, if we want to have more convenient abutment cutting, then plastic can be used. And also, the most popular way in the custom abutment would be this titanium abutment. Now, titanium abutment, as you see, this type of one-fit abutment exists, and here, with the titanium nitride or zinc coating, you give gold color. And like this type of processing at the lab using a milling machine, it's produced. So for this aesthetics, it's given with gold color, and customizable area is of the 3 areas I talked about. It's all customizable. So in aesthetic area, link abutment is very much used. And this is screw type. And on the right side, this what I'm showing is from the OSTEM catalog PDF file. And link abutment in the digital age, it's become more popular. And in creating screw type provisional, this is used. And if not screw type, but on top of link abutment, mesostructure or abutment is connected. And 4.0, 4.5 diameter, and it has various sizes, and open type, it's easy to follow lingual contour, and if you use angular screw, it's better. But in terms of link abutment, mesostructure, or screw type, temporary, if it's in there, we connect it with the resin cement, so it's not really durable as much. So you could have a cylinder type or the open type depending on your requirement. And as you can see on the right side, 3D STL file is the screw type abutment, and as you can see, there is a connecting part, and here you use the resin cement to link the link abutment. If you link a crown, it's one thing, and if it's a mesostructure, then it becomes zirconia abutment.
메소스트럭처, 이거 메소스트럭처라고 부르는데 이걸 붙이면은 지르코니아 어버트먼트가 되죠.
So link abutment and top structure resin cement, and as I said, is used. And to create running room, root and crowns we connect as S-curve, and sometimes we add or cut resin for gingiva molding. And design for customizable abutment on the gingiva side, we say concave shape is better. So ring rave and concave, and the crown parts, this curve, if that is considered, we call it S curve. But as I said in the last lecture, this too smooth S curve is not so good in the gingiva. It should be a bit separated. So that would give you a more aesthetic temporary. So mostly link abutment, as I said, is used. Oh, and also this screw type abutment creates running room, and then to transfer that into final, like this on the CAD cam, the final screw type shape or form is superimposed like this. Next, when we use link abutment to create a screw type temporary or customized abutment is used, but sometimes we can also use stock abutment. Link abutment, gingiva's height as 1, 2, 3, and the diameter starts from about 4.5. So gingiva height is about 1, and the diameter is 4.5, and stock abutment of that size used. On top of that, crown, including running room, is designed and put on stock abutment, and then like link abutment, of course you have to use final cement. Then the screw type temporary can be used as if it's link abutment, and theoretically on top of stock abutment you can create mesostructure, but mostly we don't really do that. But in temporary it's actually very much possible. Now multi-unit abutment, and for this multi-unit abutment, in the connected fixture, and it's as if it's turned into external one. Its diameter starts from 4.8, so link abutment, stock abutment, compared to that, it starts off a bit thicker. On top of that, the metal cylinder is there, and it also comes with thickness. So the starting point of the running room in customization, you have to start with the bigger diameter, and on top of cylinder, prosthesis is connected, and you can see how it's connected at the bottom photo. Metal color is exposed, so it might not look that aesthetic, so you have to be very careful in selecting appropriate case. But here, mostly in the aesthetic area, rather than using this abutment, you use link abutment, and this abutment is mostly multiples for immediate temporary prosthesis. To external is less sensitive, so you mostly use this one for temporary. And the abutment structure shows it's favorable for using of the angle screw. So if you select good cases, fitting cases, you can create good prosthesis. And this abutment has the same part as aesthetic row, so impression coping or using analog, not digital, analog processing, in other words, is possible. And customizable abutment, gold casting abutment that used to be popular, or MP casting also exists, but it has not less become popular these days, so I will skip these parts. Now, aesthetics of abutments. First, what I recommend is zirconia mesostructure. In other words, zirconia abutment using the link structure. For this person, abutment put in and crown is put in, and gingiva is same color as what's around. So gingiva is a bit thick, so any abutment would have been okay. Next case, Again, on top of gingiva, temporary abutment is used, and bottom side, you attach temporary, and the right bottom is final crown. So gingiva shadow looks rather natural. And this case also the same. Here, I did it in my early days, so abutment design-wise, it's not that elegant. Next, especially if the gingiva is thick biotype, then general metal abutment, if you adjust the margin position, then you can get good aesthetic result. If you compare these two, it's right after abutment, the top one, so it looks a bit pale, but after putting in the abutment, the shadow is not that severe. For this patient, compared to the other patient, it's thicker, so abutment color is okay. And also, general abutment, we put in gold color. And for this patient, it's not my patient, but gingiva looks rather thin. So rather than general abutment, titanium nitride coated gold colored abutment seems to be, compared to general metal color, negative impact from shadow is minimal. But still, there is still a bit of metal feel there. Inevitably, this is my patient, and of course, to the patient on the anterior side, I ask whether he wants zirconia abutment or general abutment. Let the patient to choose. Of course, zirconia is a bit more pricey, but here gold temporary was used and slightly gold color was exposed. So we switched to another abutment because the patient did not like it. And abutment was a bit showing, but aesthetically it was okay. So gold color abutment and gingiva color can be, we can compensate, but if there's a margin recession, it will be difficult to compensate. Hence, in the aesthetic zone, the first choice should be link abutment, zirconia abutment. Next is on the anterior side, if ER type, which has retrievability, and if you want to use that, then of course you can deliver on the palatal side and you'll be okay. If not, you have to use angled screw. And angled screw, the screw hole in the abutment needs to be a bit angled. So manually you have to do a bit cutting, especially stuck abutment. And depending on where you cut, you have to also create a hole on your prosthesis. As for the link abutment like this, if you use open type, the screw hole can be angled. But there's a limitation. Also, sometimes you have to do some cutting. And if you cut link abutment, then in terms of retention power, the crown that goes on top of it, the mesostructure abutment can be not really hold for long. So I don't recommend the cutting link abutment. So custom abutment, titanium abutment, you could also do some cutting, but we call this angled screw channel. And the screw hole you can design to be angled, but even with this design, there could be issues with milling. So if it's like general processing on the shelf, you cannot create this angled design. So zirconia with the disc, you have to do milling to make this. But if you use the milling machine, then you also have to cut the connection part. So in using this abutment, you have to be really cautious. Next, multi-unit abutment. So the structure of multi-unit abutment on the left side, link, if you see the link abutment, screw compared to cylinder is a bit on the lower side, but the multi-unit abutment screw is on top of cylinder. So if you give angle, the metal part is not hinged. So if you have to twist the direction of the screw, sometimes it's better to use multi-units. Next is about things to be considered in the abutment selection. I'll keep this part short. First is about space. So abutment and gingiva and prosthesis material space is what I'm talking about. And space, if sufficient, then with the stock abutment is possible. But if the prosthesis and gingiva space is not sufficient, if the prosthesis space is not sufficient, then top part should be custom abutment. And if the gingiva space falls short, then gingiva abutment might be better choice. And about the abutment with the prosthesis type, you have the screw and cement and ER types, and screw type compared to ER type, it's a bit different. Crown and abutment is comes as one, but creating this one, MP casting or the gold cast or link abutment are the only ones that can do. So only two options available for this type of approach. And for the cement type, the screw hole position, if it's not important, any abutment can do. And for the stock abutment or custom abutment, all possible, but gold cast abutment or link abutment could also do to create the cementation type of abutment. ER type, if you use this, you have to also put a hole on the prosthesis. So if you don't place it very well, you can have a very tricky situation on your hand. So if the placement position is good, any abutment would do. If not, angled screw needs to be used. So you should use a abutment that allows you to use angle screw. And diameter should also be considered. For aesthetics, before extraction, having same diameter as natural teeth would be good, but to match the diameter, of course, in central, lateral incisors and canine, there's recommended sizes, but using ready-made abutment is better for aesthetics. Next, gingiva height. If the gingiva height is too low or if it's too high, then natural running room can be not created. So gingiva margin or the margin above 3 millimeters of the depth is the recommendation. So gingiva height, if it's 3 millimeter abutment, then natural abutment emerges profile can be created with stock abutment also. But as I said, if the gingiva height is, even if it's low, then the red line, this crown area's running room, can be adjusted to have more aesthetic results. And that's what I already said. Then biotype. If it's thin biotype, then you have to use more aesthetic abutment. So gold color or zirconia or abutment should be used, and link abutment could also be used. Casting type abutment can also be used, but on top of abutment, create metal structure, and their opaque material porcelain could be also used. But here, it's not easy to polish if it's opaque. So if you don't polish, then gingiva's health could be damaged. So if it's a thick biotype, then whatever the abutment shadow doesn't really create aesthetic problem, so any abutment type can be used. But if the gingival margin changes and result in recession, there could be exposure. So even in thick biotype, if possible, aesthetic abutment, in other words, zirconia abutment, due to many reasons, it will be better. So summary, now from last lecture to this lecture, consistently I've been saying that on the anterior aesthetic zone area, if possible, after the immediate loading after extraction should be done. So while the gingiva is preserved or extraction socket is preserved, then by using screw type temporary, gingiva molding and support should be done. And screw type temporary, root and crowns, that transition zone should be reproduced as much as possible, and through that, and also you have to have sufficient time for remodeling. And once you think gingiva has stabilized, then you take impression for final abutment. And the impression for final abutment, temporary running room needs to be imitated. Hence, customized impression coping, it would be the most ideal choice, but if you use CAD/CAM, then whatever impression you take or whatever scan you do, temporary outer part can be reflected, so any limitation in impression taking becomes less important. And also, provisionals created running room to imitate it in the final. So running room is not symmetry. Therefore, it's better to use customizable abutment, and the color impacts aesthetics. So for me, on the anterior aesthetic zone, my first option is using zirconia abutment or mesostructure abutment. That's my recommendation.
즉 링크 어버트먼트에 메소 스트럭처를 결합한 구조의 지르코니아 어버트먼트를 추천드리고 싶습니다.
So I talked about on the anterior prosthesis what you need to take into consideration. I hope this has been very helpful to you. Thank you very much.